Lucas Grant never believed in bad luck until the night he answered a Craigslist ad and found himself sitting in a stranger's living room, staring at a basement door that wouldn't stay shut. By 3 a.m., he realized he wasn't the one doing the watching. I found the ad on Craigslist late one night while scrolling through job postings in the dim glow of my laptop screen. My bank account balance was shrinking fast, and rent loomed over me like a storm cloud ready to burst. I wasn't looking for anything glamorous, just quick cash. That's when the post caught my eye. Night watch, $300 per night, no questions asked. It was so short and vague that it almost felt suspicious, but the pay was too good to ignore. The picture attached was grainy and old, showing a 2-story house with cracked white paint and dark heavy curtains pulled shut over every window. The description was no better. Stay in the living room from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. Do not enter the basement. No phones allowed. That was it. No job history required. No explanation of duties. Just rules. I stared at it for a long time, half expecting my better judgment to kick in. But all I could think about was what $300 could do for me in one night. I told myself it was probably some wealthy recluse with trust issues, someone who wanted a body in the house just in case. The no phones part was odd, but maybe they were paranoid about pictures being taken. The basement thing was weirder. Still, I was more curious than cautious. The address was about 30 minutes outside the city, past the last stretch of gas stations and diners, into a more rural, empty part of town. The drive there was unsettling. The streetlights grew sparse until there weren't any at all, just the pale glow of my headlights cutting through the darkness. The house stood at the end of a narrow dirt road, half hidden by overgrown trees. Up close it looked worse than in the picture. The paint was more peeled, the wood warped and weathered. The windows, all covered from the inside, made the place seem blind. The front door was already unlocked. That detail stuck in my mind, but I stepped in anyway, my shoes sinking slightly into a faded, dust-coated rug. The air was stale and heavy, carrying the faint scent of dust and something sharper metallic, almost like rust. The only light in the house came from a single lamp in the living room, casting an orange glow over an armchair, a low coffee table, and the closed basement door directly ahead. There were no clocks, no TVs, no decorations, just bare yellowed walls and that one lamp. I placed my bag on the coffee table and glanced at the basement door. The wood was old and dark, its paint chipped, the brass knob dull with age. It had no lock, just a keyhole that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The silence in the house was strange. In city apartments there's always background noise, cars, voices, something. Here it was as though the walls swallowed every sound. I could hear my own heartbeat, quick from the drive and the creeping unease of being alone in a stranger's home. I sat in the armchair facing the basement, figuring it was best to keep it in sight. The job was simple enough. Sit here until 6, then leave. Easy money. My phone was in my car, as instructed. Without it, I felt oddly vulnerable, like a lifeline had been cut. An hour passed in total stillness. The lamp's faint hum filled the silence. My eyes drifted to the shadowed corners of the room, where the light didn't quite reach. Every so often, the house made tiny noises, a groan from the wood, a faint shift like it was breathing. I told myself it was old construction, nothing more. But then, just after 2 a.m. I heard it, a knock, slow, measured 3 taps against the basement door. The sound wasn't loud, but it was sharp in the stillness, cutting through the quiet like a blade. My back straightened, every muscle in my body tightening. The knock came again, the same deliberate rhythm, as though whoever was on the other side wasn't in a hurry. My eyes locked on the door, waiting for the knob to turn, for something to happen. It didn't. The silence after the knocks was somehow worse, a vacuum that made the air feel heavier. I thought about the rule. Do not enter the basement. I hadn't planned to break it. But now the thought of opening the door pressed against my mind like a whisper I couldn't shake. My rational side insisted it was just the house, maybe a pipe or some old wood shifting, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Somewhere beyond that door, something was waiting. I didn't move for a long time after the knocking stopped. My eyes stayed locked on the basement door, expecting the knob to twitch or the wood to rattle, but nothing happened. The lamp hummed faintly beside me, the only sound in the stillness. And yet I couldn't shake the sense that something on the other side was aware of me, listening, waiting. The rule about the basement wasn't just a precaution, it felt like a warning. I tried to control my breathing, to convince myself the sound had been in my head, but the air in the room had changed. It felt thicker, heavier, as though the house itself had started holding its breath. I leaned back slowly in the chair, forcing my muscles to relax, but every tiny creak in the old floorboards made my pulse jump. Then, it came again, not the knocking, but footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps, one at a time, climbing wooden stairs. The sound was muffled but unmistakable, as though the boards themselves groaned in protest with each press of weight. They weren't hurried or clumsy. They were measured, confident, almost practiced. The sound stopped directly on the other side of the basement door. The silence after was worse than the sound itself. My ears strained to catch anything, the scrape of a shoe, a shift of clothing, breathing, but there was nothing. It was as though whoever, or whatever, had stopped there and knew I was listening, and was determined to be quieter than I could imagine. My eyes flicked to the doorknob. It didn't turn, the door didn't move, yet my skin prickled as if someone were standing just inches away, separated from me by nothing more than a thin piece of wood. I gripped the armrests, frozen in place, unsure whether to run or stay perfectly still. The minutes dragged. My mind replayed the sound over and over, trying to place it, trying to rationalize it. Maybe there were animals in the basement, raccoons, stray cats, but the weight of those steps didn't match small animals. And besides, how would they climb stairs? The air grew colder. My hands felt numb, and I realized I'd been gripping the chair so tightly my knuckles ached. I closed my eyes for a second, just to calm down, telling myself I'd make it through the night if I just stayed put. I must have drifted into a shallow, uneasy half-sleep because the next thing I knew, I was jolting awake to complete darkness. The lamp beside me had gone out, leaving the room in a thick, suffocating black. My eyes strained to adjust, but the shadows seemed endless, swallowing the walls, the ceiling, even the edges of the floor. I could no longer see the basement door, but I could still feel where it was, a dark spot in an already lightless room. My breathing quickened. I wanted to stand, to move toward the door and find the lamp's switch, but something in me resisted. My instincts screamed not to get up. Then I heard it. A faint creak from the floorboards, closer than before. My head snapped toward the sound, but there was nothing to see, only darkness. When I blinked, my eyes caught the faintest shift in the blackness ahead, a line of even deeper shadow against the dark. My stomach dropped when I realized what it was. The basement door was open. Not wide, but enough that I could see an outline of the doorway, just a darker cut in the black of the room. I didn't hear it open. I didn't hear the knob turn, but there it was, yawning toward me like the mouth of something alive. I sat frozen, not daring to move, every nerve in my body on edge. The cold air from the opening crept toward me, carrying with it a faint, sickly smell, metallic like rust, but sharper. I kept staring into the gap, my mind searching for movement in the dark. For a long time there was nothing, no sound, no shape, just the open door and the quiet pressure of something watching me from the black beyond. Somewhere deep in my chest I felt it. I was no longer alone in the room. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at that narrow gap in the basement doorway. My eyes were locked on it, my body stiff with the kind of fear that keeps you perfectly still, as if movement alone might draw attention to you. The darkness spilling out of that opening seemed thicker than the rest of the room, almost like it was swallowing the dim outlines of the furniture around it. I tried to convince myself the door had simply swung open because of some draft, but there was no breeze, no windows open, no movement of air, only the steady, cold creep of whatever was seeping out from below. My legs felt heavy, but I forced myself to stand. The chair creaked as my weight left it, the sound loud in the oppressive silence. I backed up slowly, every step deliberate, my gaze fixed on the basement. I expected no. I knew something would emerge from that darkness at any moment, but nothing did. The gap stayed still, silent, empty. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I thought about the front door, about how quickly I could reach it if I moved now, but the thought faded almost immediately when I remembered the payment waiting for me. It was stupid, dangerously stupid, to think about money when something like this was happening. But desperation can do that to a person. I told myself I just needed to wait it out. 6 o'clock wasn't far, I could make it. I turned to put more distance between myself and the basement, and my hand brushed against the wall. That's when I felt it, deep grooves carved into the plaster. My fingers followed the uneven lines, feeling the jagged edges where chunks of wall had been torn away. They were long, irregular scratches, too deep for fingernails, but too erratic for a tool. My stomach turned as I pictured someone or something dragging its nails down the wall again and again, over years, until the grooves became part of the house itself. I looked back at the basement door, my breath caught in my throat. It was closed again. I hadn't heard it move. The hinges hadn't squeaked, the knob hadn't turned. It was just closed, as though it had never been open. I stood there, my mind racing through explanations. Maybe I'd imagined it open. Maybe I'd fallen asleep without realizing it and dreamed the whole thing. But the cold air still clung to me, and the metallic smell was stronger now, filling the room in a way that made my stomach churn. I sat back down, forcing my gaze to stay on the basement door. My body was tense, my muscles aching from the constant state of readiness. I kept telling myself that if I just kept my eyes open, if I just stayed alert, I could make it through until morning. The minutes dragged. My eyelids grew heavier despite the fear keeping my heart in overdrive. I fought it, shifting in my seat, clenching my fists, anything to stay awake. But no matter how hard I tried, exhaustion crept in. My mind began to drift into strange half-thoughts like the edges of a dream I couldn't quite escape. That's when the smell changed. It was still metallic, but now there was something else, something sour and putrid, like rotting meat left in the sun. My stomach twisted. The scent seemed to be coming from directly beneath me, as if it were rising through the floor itself. I glanced down at the floorboards and noticed tiny gaps between them, dark lines where the wood didn't quite meet. Something glistened in one of those gaps. At first I thought it was water, maybe from a leaky pipe, but as I leaned forward, I saw it was thicker, darker. A slow bead of liquid was pushing up between the boards, pooling into a small, sticky droplet. The faint light caught it just enough to show its color deep red, almost black. I jerked back in my seat, my heart hammering. The droplet swelled until it spilled over, streaking down the side of the board and disappearing into the shadows beneath my chair. More of it followed, seeping up in slow, steady pulses, as though the house itself was bleeding. I wanted to move, to get away from whatever was beneath me, but I couldn't stop staring at it. My breath came in short gasps, my ears straining for any sound from below. And then, from somewhere deep under the floor, I heard a faint, deliberate scraping, as if something was trying to find its way up. The scraping was steady, dragging along the wood beneath my feet in slow, deliberate motions. It wasn't random. Like an animal scratching to get out, it was paced, methodical, as if whatever was down there knew exactly where I was and wanted me to know it was getting closer. Every pull against the underside of the floor sent a vibration through the chair and up my legs. I sat frozen, gripping the armrests so tightly my hands ached. The smell from the seepage between the floorboards was unbearable now, a thick, metallic stench mixed with the foul sweetness of rot. It filled my lungs with every shallow breath I took, making me feel like I was breathing in something rotten from the inside out. The dark liquid was spreading slowly across the boards, curling in thin streams toward the base of the basement door. I glanced at my watch. The glowing numbers mocked me. It wasn't even 4 in the morning yet. 2 hours until I could leave, assuming I lasted that long. My pulse thudded in my ears, loud enough to drown out everything else until the scraping stopped. The sudden silence was somehow worse. I sat in that stillness, my muscles taut, waiting for whatever came next. And then I heard them footsteps again. This time they didn't come from the basement stairs. They moved directly beneath me, tracing a slow, deliberate path around the exact spot where my chair had been. I could follow them in my mind, circling me like a predator testing its prey. Each step seemed to rise slightly, the sound of weight pressing against the boards coming closer to the surface, as if the thing below was stretching itself upward. My skin crawled, my instincts screaming for me to run, but when I looked toward the front door, my chest tightened. The door was gone. In its place was a wall, same peeling paint, same faded pattern in the wallpaper, as if the door had never existed at all. I blinked hard, willing it to reappear, but it didn't. I spun toward the windows, thinking I could break one if I had to, but the glass was gone too. The frames were there, but they were filled with thick, solid boards nailed from the inside, each one weathered and splintered with age. The walls felt closer somehow, as though the room had shrunk around me. My breaths came faster, my chest tightening with a mix of panic and the suffocating air. I turned toward the basement door, the only opening left in the room, and for the first time I noticed it seemed larger than before. Taller, wider. The blackness between the door and the frame was thicker, almost like it was spilling into the room the way the liquid had from the floorboards. I told myself I wouldn't go near it. I didn't care about the money anymore. I just wanted to survive the night. But with the front door gone and the windows sealed, there was nowhere else to go. The scraping sound started again, only now it was accompanied by something else, a faint, wet sound, like something dragging across damp ground. It grew louder, moving upward through the floor, until it stopped directly under me. The liquid between the boards pulsed again, thicker now, spreading into a wider pool at my feet. I stepped back instinctively, my shoes sticking slightly to the boards with each movement. The sound below followed me, matching my steps exactly. I pressed myself against the far wall, my eyes locked on the floor as the boards began to bow inward, bending under some unseen weight. The wood creaked, groaned, and then something tapped from beneath, 3 slow knocks, identical to the ones I'd heard earlier on the basement door. The sound was so close I could feel it in my bones. My vision swam with panic, and I turned toward the basement. The door was now wide open, the blackness inside darker than anything I'd ever seen, as if it swallowed even the faintest trace of light. Cold air poured out in steady waves, carrying the stench so strongly it made me gag. Something moved deep inside that darkness, a shape, too tall, too still to be human. It didn't step forward. It didn't need to. I could feel its attention on me like a hand pressing against the back of my skull. And then, from the black, I heard it breathe. Slow, heavy, wet breaths that filled the room and drowned out my own. The breathing was steady, deliberate, and impossibly deep, as though the thing in the basement was drawing in the entire room with each inhale. The sound rattled in my chest, made my own lungs feel too small. I pressed myself harder against the wall, wishing I could melt into it, but there was nowhere left to go. The open basement door loomed across the room, the darkness spilling from it like smoke without light. The shape inside hadn't moved, but its stillness was worse than any sudden motion could have been. My eyes strained to make sense of it, but the longer I looked, the more I realized it wasn't just standing there, it was taller. My mind tried to measure it against the height of the basement ceiling, but it didn't make sense. It seemed to stretch just slightly higher each time I blinked, like the shadows themselves were adding to its form. I wanted to run, but the house had closed itself in around me. The air was thick, every breath heavier than the last. My body was screaming to do something, anything, yet I felt pinned in place, like an insect under glass. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed felt alive. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was a pause, like something holding back, waiting for me to make the first move. The shadows in the doorway seemed to pulse, and then I saw it. On the floor in front of the figure was something small, faintly lit by some unseen source. My stomach twisted when I recognized it. It was my phone. I'd left it in my car, locked in the glove compartment. But there it was, lying on the basement floor just at the edge of the black. The screen flickered to life, casting a cold glow upward. My legs felt weak, but I couldn't stop myself from stepping forward. Each movement made the boards groan under my weight, and I could hear faint sounds answering me from below, as if the thing in the basement was shifting to match my steps. When I reached the doorway, the smell hit me in full force, metallic, damp, and rotting all at once. My eyes watered. The phone screen showed a Craigslist page, but it wasn't the one I'd seen before. The title at the top read, "Night Watch, $300 per night. Same job, same rules." But the address listed wasn't this house. It was my apartment. My chest tightened. I wanted to throw the phone away, but my fingers locked around it. The glow dimmed for a moment, and when it brightened again, the screen had changed. There was a new image, blurry, dark but unmistakable. It was my living room. My actual living room. And in the far corner of that photo, half hidden in shadow, was the same tall, unmoving shape I saw now. I stumbled back, but the darkness seemed to follow. The doorway didn't feel like a separation anymore. The black was creeping past the threshold, curling along the floor toward me like tendrils. The boards beneath my feet groaned, bowing under pressure from something underneath. The breathing returned, louder now, right in front of me, even though the shape still hadn't stepped forward. I tried to look away, to find some way out, but every wall of the room seemed farther away than it should have been. Like the house had stretched itself into something unfamiliar. A sudden vibration ran through the phone in my hand. I looked down without meaning to. A new message had appeared on the Craigslist listing. Accept job, with 2 options beneath yes or no. Before I could move, before I could think, the phone's screen flickered and chose for me. Yes. The darkness surged forward. The last thing I saw before it swallowed the room was the shape finally moving, unfolding itself into something impossibly tall, impossibly wide. Its edges blending into the walls, the ceiling, the floor, until there was nothing left but black. When I woke up, I wasn't in the house anymore. I was standing in my own apartment, the air still thick with that metallic stench. My phone was on the table, the same Craigslist ad glowing on its screen, except now there was a grainy picture of me sitting in my armchair, and in the corner of the image, behind me, the shape was still there.